Him and Carol, oh man, they're in love. They're so in love, Christian. And we all know when it comes to the zombie apocalypse, and you say one of those, baby, you know I will always be there for you. I will always be there for you. We will be covering Season 9, Episode 1 of The Rickless beginning of the end here, a new beginning. Christian, so panning off from the comics and what we see here, how the episode started, we see, hey, the governor is gone. He had his, or the governor, wow. Negan is gone. And now with him leaving, you know, we get this new beginning and we get this time jump.
First of all, I think we got to be very transparent that both of us fell off The Walking Dead some time ago, right around season 7. Now, I've recently binged all of it. So that was a sacrifice I did for you. And I did so because I've heard nothing but good things about season 9 so far. And it's the first season under new showrunner Angela Kang. So I wanted to give it, it's the episode's called A New Beginning. I wanted to give it a new beginning. So I caught up and I watched it. The first thing that really jumps out is the time jump, right? There is an 18-month time jump, and it manifests itself in a couple ways. You got little ass kicker Judith, like she's a little girl. She's running around in fields, man.
How crazy is that? Looking at her right away, like ooh,
no, for sure, man. And then of course you got like Grandpa Rick over there. He's doing his thing, But that's one example. People are like growing older. The world is passing by. We get another one which I really liked, which is like you see them kind of moving past the point of like, oh, we're constantly scared of zombies to we can use them as a resource. You know what I mean? So there's this really great scene where they use it as a scarecrow, which I liked, right? Because that's like some farming agricultural thing that we've been doing for forever. And now we actually have a more effective version of it. Did you like what examples of the time jumps and stuff like really stood out to you?
You know what? I mean, I think everything with Judith, I mean, just seeing, Maggie walking around with the stroller, right? Like, oh, there's little, didn't they call it Herschel? Yeah, I noticed that time jump, seeing everything progress. And again, I think now every Walking Dead season always starts off kind of good, right? This is the beginning of something new. But, as we quickly see with the time jump, now they're scavenging for parts, and we see all three communities, Hilltop, Sanctuary, and Alexandria, all working closely together and one another, and they're all doing like trade and commerce and all that stuff. And we see the beginning of them, even like fixing motorcycles with Daryl and working together as a group. So one of the first things we do see in the episode, starting off chronologically, is them entering this museum right here. So they go to this museum right here because what are they trying to get, Christian? They're trying to get like a...
it was a carriage, but there's a couple things because they also went in to grab seeds, remember? They were trying to like get new seeds so the sanctuary would be able to grow some stuff. So there was like multi-purpose thing. But also we'd be remiss if we don't mention that they actually went to DC. Now, Alexandria is my hometown. So we're only 5 miles outside of DC anyway, but this is the first time we've actually seen them venture out. So you have to imagine, dude, zombie apocalypse, 5 miles is like, you don't want to be 5 miles away from home in the zombie apocalypse.
Absolutely. Yeah.
Yeah. So I thought that was cool that we actually get to see a set piece where we see the Washington Monument, kind of, the Washington Mall is all grown over and stuff like that. That was really great. But they enter into this museum to basically get this ancient carriage. I don't know how ancient it was, a couple hundred years, maybe something like that. And to grab seeds so they can help the sanctuary out. Dude, I actually really love this scene. And like full disclosure, I don't know how you felt about it, but the first 25 minutes of this episode, I was like, holy shit, like they've done something here.
Yeah, no, I mean, we see them all working together and them trying to accomplish something. And of course, in true spectacular Walking Dead fashion, we just can't have something so easy. So we see them as they're carrying this carriage that, something ends up happening, and King Ezekiel himself ends up falling out, and then, we see them pulling him together, right? And, oh my gosh, is he going to die? Is he going to die? Well, if you're smart into television, of course he's not going to die. They can't give the man a South Park death right away. I mean, although they did do it later on, which we'll get to at some point in the episode, but we see them helping out Ezekiel, and everything works out.
For me, this is one of my favorite parts of it because this is the big action set piece, right? Like every premiere, every finale needs to have like some big action thing happen. And I really like this one because the floor that the main museum is on is glass. It was like a transparent floor. And below it, you could see nothing but all these walkers hanging out. So I like that because like just in terms of like a metaphor for storytelling, right? It's like you see the transparency of what's beneath you, right? Like you know how dire this is. So like using glass as a metaphor is really great. Like every step you could take was bad. And Angela Kang, or I think Greg Nicotero, the guy who does all the art, the makeup, sorry, he directed the episode. So he like paid real attention to like each step they took. That was really good filmmaking for me, man, because eventually the glass breaks. Ezekiel almost falls through. You gotta go! Let me go! And it's actually suspenseful. Like I know that, yeah, you and I, we've seen enough TV that we know like how stories kind of progress. And yeah, he could have died right there. But at the same time, they kept cutting to that shot of the rope being cut by the glass and everyone pulling. And you're like, oh, shit. And for me, I mean, it was really effective, dude. I thought it was like easily like the audacity of the show at this late in the age, right? Where they have to constantly like one up themselves to do like, oh shit, they're going to fall through the floor as the main set piece. I thought was really, really smart.
So the next thing we see after all that is said and done, we see our boy King Ezekiel. And now we see that him and Carol, oh man, they're in love. They're so in love, Christian. And we all know when it comes to the zombie apocalypse and you say one of those, baby, you know I will always be there for you. I will always be there for you. So we don't have to worry about King Ezekiel dying at all this season. So, but you know, jokes aside, how do you feel about it? I like to see Carol, you know, her continuation of her character growing strong to kind of backing off and to kind of doing the right thing and keeping herself sheltered and to finally accepting someone else to welcome her in her life and be happy. Good for her. You know, because, you know, when you look back and reflect, I mean, everyone, I want all you guys to know, even the chat. I mean, were you always rooting for Carol and Daryl when that was a thing? It always seemed like they were trying to play with that idea, but they never came to it full fruition, you know?
It always felt, I don't want to say maternal, but it was in the neighborhood of maternal, right? Like it almost seemed like she was an aunt or like a super older sister. I don't know, but it never felt like that's what it was. What you did understand was that they meant a great deal to one another, right? But it never felt romantic to me.
Let's go ahead and go into the next scene. And after that, we get our very first South Park death by none other than Ken. And let me just say, hashtag that is not my Ken. That's not the Ken I know. That's going to just go off and kill himself so quickly because he cares about the horses, Christian. You know, he cares for the well-being of animals. And man, in this zombie apocalypse, hey man, bravo. But in a show like this, and of course, we can't have any tension when everything is just so happily ever after. We have to see someone die. And who ends up dealing with that is none other than Maggie, because Ken was, of course, a member of the Hilltop community, right? And now that we see Ken ended up dying and Maggie is leading this role, now she has to do the right thing and confront Ken's parents. Like, hey, your son died on this expedition. And now we see the tension build from one community to the other, because what do Ken's parents end up saying? Well, none of this would have happened if it wasn't for what? I think it was Sanctuary. If Sanctuary didn't need some food or something like that. And yeah, now we're getting the tension from the parents. And of course, how do you feel about that? You know, because it seems like they're setting up for something very easy of Maggie going on to this dark side, because we know Lauren Cohan only signed up for 6 episodes.
Yeah, I've heard it's 10 episodes, but I ain't confirmed on any of that. By the way, before we get into like the tension, we glossed over this death, and it's the funniest death I've ever seen, at least this week, you know. Yeah. For me, it's one of those things like nowadays on The Walking Dead, and this is my one criticism, not my one criticism, but it's a criticism. Yeah. It's like if people get bit by zombies at this late stage, like, you know, these dudes are decomposing, half of them don't have jawbones anymore. Like, it's because you fucked up. Like, you did something wrong to put yourself in a zombie position, okay? Mm-hmm. And that's what happened here. Like, this guy, I don't know, man. It bothered me so bad. And it was comical because, like, it happened almost in slow motion. Oh, you know? Yeah. So, like, they're trying to make it a bigger deal than it is. And they put the entirety of the weight of that on the parent characters, right? Mm-hmm. Like, those actors have to bring home what a tragedy it was, because on screen, it was sort of a comedy.
You still don't think by now that, like, this if you go out on any mission to, like, grab some stuff, you'd be wearing, like, pads. Like, I forgot who in the comics of Walking Dead, it was Ezekiel's group, where they kind of had, like, the padded armor, where they knew if they're going out on expeditions, I'm going to protect myself just in case a zombie tries to bite me, you know? So when we see this tension, of course, it doesn't bode too well with Maggie, because now we ended up seeing the appearance of who's the person who used to lead Hilltop again?
Gregory.
Yeah. We see that, and I don't have a picture of Gregory, but we see them and doing the elections and talking about like, yeah, Maggie barely won, but hey, I guess she's doing things right. And of course, you know, we see Gregory confronting the parents of Ken's parents and saying, hey, like, here's some alcohol, and, you know, I'm not going to do anything inconspicuous about, you know, leading some sort of a surprise attack on Maggie. And how do you think all that was dealt with?
I mean, not great. I mean, you know, credit where credit's due. The first 25 minutes of this and like the last 5 minutes are pretty solid, but there's a lot of silly in the middle. It doesn't take away from any of the promise. Like the things that they are doing are very interesting. They just have to be able to execute it better. Mm-hmm. That scene rang a little false because, you know, the parents are obviously upset and they're crying in front of Maggie. And the husband seems like he's this kind, compassionate person. And then Gregory, what? Because he gets him drunk and talks to him for 2 minutes, gets him to go kill a mother. You know what I mean? Like it just rang real false to me. And I like, you can't have that shit going on. If you're trying to rebrand this show as being like this better version of what it was, you can't have like characters acting dumb or not within themselves from scene to scene.
I understand the parents grieving and I understand what the scene is trying to do. It's like, yeah, you're right. You know what? And alcohol is going to be the conduit on why, the catalyst on why I'm going to go out and do something upsetting. But dude, this father, drunk or not, almost killed, you know, essentially the leader of the group with a child. Like, that's the thing. And then, again, I was more surprised. And again, well, they got rid of Gregory towards the end of the episode, you know, but it just blew my mind that they even kept Gregory on to begin with because he was such a lying, just a snake. He was just a snake through and through. And him playing the, like, what did they do? You know, was kind of ridiculous, you know?
We'll come back to Gregory. I think what we should do is jump to the sanctuary if we can, because there was some interesting like relationship stuff that happened there. And obviously this is the aftermath of the Negan situation. Dude, Rick is famous. Did you know this, Miles?
Yeah, no, Rick is famous, all right. So is that the famous Rick Grimes?
No, man, it's a thing now. I mean, he walks in there and they're like, he's the man who ended the war. Go Rick Grimes. Like, it's a whole fucking thing. So I'm glad. I mean, it's cool. I guess he's got some fame, but all is not well at the sanctuary, Miles. That's the problem, right? Like, there's some discontent being sowed there. And I think he comes in and what do they say? They see Savior Save Us, right? Written on the wall. Someone came out there and there it is. Yep. We are still Negan. All right. People are still carrying that dude's torch. All right. So things aren't super peachy. I mean, even though people are outwardly nice to Rick, they're not necessarily, but not everyone's on the same page. Right.
Absolutely.
So we kind of catch up with everyone. We see that Daryl's sort of reluctantly leading this place. And this is actually my favorite scene of the whole episode, if I can talk about it really quickly. So we have a scene with Daryl and Rick. And there's this great scene. And I'm like, look, I don't think Walking Dead gets meta very often, but this was like a meta episode, a meta scene where they're talking about how he doesn't want to lead it. And he's like, you know, that original group in Atlanta, that small group, like we could have done anything. You know what I mean? That was us. Like, this ain't nothing. Right. And I feel like he's talking about the show. I think he's straight up talking about The Walking Dead. And I like that Rick comes back and he says, well, you know, everyone's in different places because everyone's changed. And Daryl fires back immediately. Well, you changed them, Rick. You know?
Yeah.
I love that, dude, because it felt like the new showrunner trying to reconcile the show's past, like with its potential future and all that stuff. And I could be reading into this as I do at times, but like for me, it was a powerful scene within the context of the show, but also as a larger dialogue, because I feel like Daryl is the Walking Dead fan base that wants to love the show again. You know what I mean?
Yeah, absolutely. And it's interesting to see the role that he's in, that, you know, he ends up telling Rick even in the episode, like, dude, you know, I'm just better off out there, just killing and just being, it sounds so bad to say. It's like being the best second player out there because, yeah, can I do the leader the leadership role, sure, but like I'm known just as the hand of the king, so to speak, you know, and just to get the stuff done that needs to be done. He's definitely setting himself apart, and to see him grow as a character, you can see now he's more in tune with his emotions, and that like he's not afraid to speak what's on his mind. And the relationship that he ends up telling Rick, where he's like, dude, the people in the sanctuary, I think they're doing okay. But then when you see this, you know, Savior save us, and then that one guy responds with, well, hey, we don't have any more paint. And Daryl's like, well, get that shit off. Do something to get it off. You know, it's still kind of scary, even with the time jump, knowing that some people were comfortable under the Negan leadership. So, you know, I think seeing Daryl kind of just progress to be like, well, is the leadership role even good for me? And can I get out? You know, what am I going to do here? And that's going to be kind of interesting to see where we go with it as the season continues.
Yeah, man, there's definitely a power struggle going here. Like Maggie is not necessarily on the same page. Obviously, there's still some hard feelings about Rick's decision to let Negan live, even though he's like, a prisoner. Mm-hmm. Remember at the end of season 8, it looked like there was going to be a power move, Maggie and Daryl versus Rick. That's what it seemed like. You know, now we did this time jump, and maybe that's still coming. Maybe everyone's biding their time, but all isn't well. Like there are people within the sanctuary who aren't happy. Maggie thinks that their mercy was the fact that they didn't murder every single person in the sanctuary, you know? Yeah. So for her, she's like, I don't owe them food or gasoline or anything. No, fuck them. So yeah, man, all is not well. And I think that this, on top of all that shit she's dealing with, some guy just tried to kill her at the hilltop, you know? So we can circle back there if you want to talk about the very end of the episode, because after we know that Gregory is the mastermind, the culprit of said assassination attempt, and she's an elected representative. It is an assassination, Miles. We get to the point where she has to kind of be judge, jury, and executioner, right? And I really like this scene because Rick and Michonne are visiting the hilltop at this time, you know? So they're witness to what's going to happen. And so she has Gregory on horseback with a noose around his neck, and she kills this guy, man, you know? And I like that already because you're seeing like that Rick is in this mercy shit right now, you know, like as he does from time to time. But Maggie as a leader, she ain't having none of this shit. Yeah. Negan wouldn't be alive, and neither the fuck is Gregory. And I love that there is like not even a hint of indecision there, man. It kind of sets the tone immediately.
Well, that's the thing. Going into the end of the spoilers of Walking Dead Season 8, you know, it ends with, you know, Rick slashing Negan's throat, right? And he says, I can kill you, but he's like, I'm going to show you how much better I am. You know, and it's kind of an interesting thing to even bring up with today's society where, you know, how many chances can you give, you know, the most heinous and, you know, most, you know, deadliest of criminals out there? You know, when is it like, oh, well, are we just going to kill them with the electric chair, or are we going to give them a chance because they deserve it? But, oh, guess what? They also killed like thousands of people, you know? So we're in this situation where, yeah, I like how Maggie's like, I'm not taking fucking shit from no one. I'm like, you know, the guy that, you know, ended up dying, good, you know, because he sucks. And I love how Maggie stands up and is very different from Rick into saying, you know what, man? I mean, this Rick-tatorship, hey, that's fine. That fairy tale stuff, that's cute. But you know what? Under my rule, under the Hilltop rule, I love how effective this scene was, except for the kids. And I'll get into the kids in 2 seconds. But I love how she shows around like, listen, I'm not trying to be the bad guy here. I'm not the villain. But if you fuck with me... there's no room for idiocy, you know. There's no room for any of this dumb shit under my rule. And I like seeing that and seeing that, you know, that contrast with Daryl in the sanctuary with he's kind of unsure where he is. And then you have passive Rick. So now to see these three things mesh together in season 9, also knowing once again that this is the first episode of the end with Rick. It's going to be interesting to go with the season.
I think that this episode was a lot of people telling Maggie that she's a lot like Rick, right? Like, oh, that's your mentor, blah, 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 right? That last scene kind of shows like, no, I'm totally willing to be out of step with Rick. But at the same time, just like leaving Negan alive is a problem, bro. Like you've created a problem that will eventually fuck you over, right? Maggie's decision to kind of turn her back on the sanctuary, like not wanting to help them, that is the same thing. It's short-sighted, right? Because all you're going to do is have a bunch of hungry, angry people who want to get retribution at you. So it's interesting that they took strides to be like, oh, she's different from Rick, but at the same time, she follows the same missteps, man.
I just wanted to quickly say before we end stuff, yeah, the whole kid scene. So you and I were like butting heads a little bit earlier. I don't think the kid scene worked because it just seems like something they can set up. They easily could have set it up in the second episode where, let's say we have that effective scene. She ends up hanging Gregory, right? And the following scene, I don't know, maybe a troubled parent or a family member can talk about it in an open discussion. And then it just so happens that the kid hears it, right? You know, whoever, little boy or girl. And they bring it up to the next episode where they see Maggie and then they're like, Maggie, like, is it true what you did? And then how would Maggie respond to the kid? You know, I just did not like how, just two kids just in time for the murder. And now Maggie is the bad one here. I'm like, they could have written that a little bit better. You know, that's just me. What do you think?
I'm not sure your way works either, because it's literally telling, not showing. You know what I mean? Like, say what you want. Maybe it's inartistic, but like, they had the characters actually witness something as opposed to hear something and then confront it secondhand. You know what I mean? Yeah. There's no ambiguity here. They saw Maggie do something really terrible. And that's in direct contrast with what she does. Overall, man, like, I don't hate it. You know what I mean? Like this episode in general, I'm hesitant to give it ratings, right? I feel like ratings are a little bit reductive, but overall, where are you feeling, man? Like, there was enough good in this to make you come back week to week so far?
Yeah, I mean, right now, this is the interesting thing. Just knowing, and this is going to be the worst comparison, so people, please make fun of me, but it's one of those things that's like, have you played Halo Reach, right? It's like, we know it's the end of these 5, like, Spartans and all that stuff, and just seeing the beginning through the end of, like, we know how this is going to end. We know somehow, whether or not Rick is gone, he is leaving the show. You know, and right now, I wish I didn't live in the world of the internet, because I'm on board with this. I like where it goes. Yeah, some missteps, but right now there's a lot more pros than there is cons. And, you know, with that being said, I know we gave that video, which is on YouTube now, about the 5 problems we have with The Walking Dead. And I love how one of them was, of course, the horrible, cheesy death that we got. I'm looking at you, Ken, you know. But besides that, ultimately, I like it. We'll see where it goes.
They really know how to start seasons, that they're so good at starting things. They're just not very good at finishing things. So, But that being said, man, I think that there's definitely a direction, and that's something that the last couple seasons have kind of lacked. Also, I mean, I was just thinking about this and I read it. It's like season 7 and season 8 literally covers 3 weeks of time only, you know? So like that stretched out kind of narrative, I think, affected the show. But now they have a clear direction. They're trying to rebuild society, and that shit's hard. It's like, what's interesting, what I'm excited about is that so far, we know the next arc is Whispers into Screams, right? So we know there's another thread out there. But right now, the big threat is just trying to maintain peace. You know what I mean? Trying to rebuild society. And that aspect, I think they've needed for a long time, and I'm really excited about it.